Hello everybody and welcome to the June 25th Crowbar Design Meeting. We've got actually a lot of exciting stuff to talk about, so I know that not everybody can stay the whole time, so let's jump in. That's all right. Any additional items to add? Jedi added, this is the, there we go. Weird. I thought I added Chef Metal in here. It must have gotten lost. Okay. We can hold this one till the end if that's all right.
Well, I'll commit to doing some Chef Metal API investigation and integration this weekend.
I think what we'll find is that there's probably some places where there's a gap, and we need to add some API piece. And I think that's the first step, is to just say, all right, this is the APIs that Chef Metal. Just document what API Chef Metal expects. Create a pad for it, and then we can create. We'll just put a story in to create the APIs if they're necessary.
Yep.
But I think that this would be a good thing to talk about at OSCON. And I think it would be worth pre-briefing Chef on. I talked to Matt Ray about this specifically.
Yeah, I might reach out to the Food Fight Show guys once we have the author of Chef Metal. He and I have a good relationship, and I'll put something together both to get it rolling and to popularize it.
I know that Chef's not excited about having Razor be the first integration.
External tool. Yeah.
And we'd like an alternative. The other thing, speaking of Matt Ray, were they Quanta servers? I think they were Supermicro MiniITX Atom boards with IPMI. Oh, this is still IPMI. I wanted to find the link for this. So the other thing that Matt Ray had talked about was that Supermicro has this MiniITX board. A MiniITX is a form factor. So yeah, they basically have this.
The big problem with Atom. Well, actually, no. Atom's not a problem. I was thinking being able to run Red Hat, but we could squeeze Red Hat or CentOS onto an Atom board.
Well, this was the trick. The key thing is it's a 64-bit processor.
Yeah.
Which is the essential thing. So it should be able to run CentOS. So the Atom boards, these Atom boards are very small footprint, super low power. I was actually looking at them for embedded control systems way back when, and the fact that this has an embedded BMC LAN is a big deal. Right. So we need to check this out and make sure it actually fits. But it would be super convenient to have a couple of these boards and be able to build a real, basically a real cluster. Because one of the things that I've wanted to do this out of Raspberry Pis, but they don't do Pixie booting. Neither do a lot of the embedded stuff. Okay. So we'll look into that and see, but that would be a real good thing to have a couple of those. All right, Judd, I know I'm going to lose you right now. So next thing I was going to jump into was the concept for the OS, the wizard. I think I have it up on the screen. Hold on just a moment. That is blue. So I got this is a dev system, so it's got bogus nodes in it in weird states. Just to heads up, do that. But I got really frustrated with doing demos where to do a demo, you actually have to go in, you have to create a network, you have to create a deployment, you have to assign the nodes into the deployment using bulk edit, you have to pick them, and then go into the deployment, commit the deployment, or add the roles, commit the deployments. Ends up being about 7 or 8 steps. And so I've been struggling for a long time on what this screen should look like, what the wizard screen should look like. And I just finally sat down and talked to people a whole bunch, and finally sat down and came up with a design that I think compresses all of those workflow steps into a single screen in a useful way. Keeping on the word useful. And I'm happy to have some feedback on it, but obviously I did actually do a wireframe drawing. I liked it enough that I just went and did it. And this is there's a pull request out there for this in partially done, so it can be reviewed, but I'm happy for feedback on it. The idea here is that what we've got is we have all right, so from this wizard, which I think we would put under probably the nodes menu, you pick the deployment that you want to add. So we're going to call this community call. Community, you pick the conduit that you want it attached to. 1G1 usually a safe default. You pick the range that you want. So this is public range. Public is probably a good one for this. It doesn't ask you the question. What it will do is it's going to create a network named the same thing as the deployment. Attached to the conduit, it's going to create this range with these IPs in it. I'll show you that. Have all that stuff working, which is pretty nice. So this
Rob,
is enough information. Yep.
Will this force the range to be applied? I remember Victor saying that ranges will only automatically be applied if they're called host.
That is correct.
So should we call this the range name host? Easy enough to do.
Well, otherwise you have to do another step. And I want to know if you incorporated that step.
I didn't. I wasn't aware of that requirement, frankly. That explains why I ran into a bug a long time ago. Now I understand why.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is we want to be able to define networks and ranges and whatnot without necessarily automatically giving systems addresses on those ranges. So the only ranges that systems will automatically get addresses bound to on discovery is host. And you really shouldn't, and that logic should pretty much stay in place. Okay.
So calling this public is good. You just need to document that it's host is, if you want to assign them, then it needs to be called host.
Well, no, if you want to have them automatically assigned, you can, if you use the CLI or if you're driven by logic in the roles, you can let the role assign addresses from whatever range in whatever network you care about.
That makes perfect sense. I'm in favor of the approach. We just need to dock it.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm on the phone.
Yeah. Thank you, Victor. but the idea here is I'm trying to minimize the number of things that people have to do. This was, as far as I could tell, the smallest number of choices that you could make to come up with something reasonable. Technically, you don't need a network to do this first step, but we were always creating a network, so I added it. And then, very simply, it gives you a checkbox of all the non-admin. So this one's admin, so it doesn't automatically check it. I was thinking of omitting the admin node from this list. I like it. Basically, this list shows all of the nodes that are in the system deployment. So they're the ones that are available. If you something like this, we'll do 2 of them because it'll reveal a bug. And then this is a dev system, so it doesn't have any operating systems. I need to fix that. It'll let you pick the operating system that you want to deploy. When you run the wizard, it is going to create the deployment, put the nodes in the deployment, automatically go to the OS installed milestone role, and add the OS install role also, and pick and update whatever that OS, you get install OS from OS installed. But the idea would be it would also set whatever OS you had chosen here. Right. Once again, this is a dev system, so I don't have that option right now. And then you can just, so from that, you go and commit. Your nodes are added and all that. And then if you go into the networks list, here's the network I just added. So those things are here, and I can check to see the community deployment. All those things are set. And here is the, okay, host v6. It does not, so I have a bug. It hasn't created the range correctly. So still new code, but I'm trying to help people see. It's easier to visualize this with an actual screen behind it. How do people feel about that? Does that look good? Sorry, Victor, what?
Host v6 is automatically created whenever you create a network range, or whenever you create a network range for IPv6 purposes. I should probably stop doing that for anything but the admin and or the admin network.
So is that a bug? Do we want to open a bug on that?
We'll need to talk about it. You may as well open an issue on it.
Okay. If you don't
See
mind
if
doing
that's desirable or
that.
not.
We can add to the design list. Yep. Okay. So does this functionality make sense for people? Does it look right?
Well, I was only here for the very last bit of it, so I don't know what exactly you're targeting with it.
My goal is to, so if you're dealing with just a simple discovery system, I'm trying to eliminate all of the 6 steps, or combine all of the 6 steps that we always seem to do to handle a new system discovery model. So if I was going to bring up, bring up a 6-node system to install the OSs to ready state, then this one screen would basically let me take them all and install the OS and go. Right. I can imagine in the future that we would add RAID or a BIOS configuration or a RAID drop down or something like that. So the idea is, it sets minimal stuff. I had a thought to converge it with bulk edit. And it's possible that those would converge, but there's a part of me that wants to keep them separate. But I think bulk edit is suited for a different purpose. Right.
Yeah, one thing I wasn't seeing in that ready state thing is that there is the provision to control what OS you want to throw on those nodes.
It would be right.
I'm sorry, you just broke up, or I lost drop the collar or something like that.
It's meant to be there, Victor. Just I don't have any OSs in my dev environment.
Okay, and I would also remove the admin node from that list entirely. The admin node should never be part of. We should never give people the ability to shoot themselves in the foot by moving the admin node out of the system deployment.
That makes sense to me. I'll make that change. I'd held off doing it, but I agree. And it would be any node with the admin flag won't show up.
Right.
And it only shows nodes that are in the system deployment. It doesn't show it. This isn't for moving nodes around. It is strictly for doing that initial discovered provision.
Okay.
So, I don't want a lot of bells and whistles on it. I included state because people, you should do this. Actually, you don't have to. I'm not even sure I need state because it doesn't matter if the node is ready, has a ready check on hardware discovered anymore. It actually hasn't mattered for a long time. So I could actually eliminate state in this also.
Yeah.
I think I'll do that. The fewer stuff that somebody has to worry about, the better it is.
Well, with that in mind, you probably shouldn't let them change the range name away from host either if you want them to not shoot themselves in the foot.
Well, I'm not sure we want that to be host. I don't know. Do we want range name to be host? I'm happy to do that.
I mean, what is the goal? I mean, what is the goal here? What's the use case for creating a separate network at the same time? Because I pretty much only ever do that for the Ceph deployment. It's dependent on the workloads. If I'm not throwing a particular workload on it, then I don't know what network I should be creating for.
That is the question that had me stumped for a while on doing this at all. It's part of a demo. It's sort of part of a demo process that I've seen for this, and I'm fine creating screens that help the demo or not adding functionality. But the simplest proof point we have that this worked is that it created and provisioned a network. And from that perspective, giving it a host name for the range and having it provision these IPs would actually be really useful.
Yeah, I think it dramatically improves the impact if someone successfully gets IP addresses on their host. They can go into them and verify the OS is there. It dramatically weakens it if they picked a different range name and the IP addresses aren't working as expected.
Right. Well, they'll get IPs from the admin network. This would be a secondary network.
Yeah, because the admin network is really designed for just in-band management and provisioning. It's not really you're not supposed to run workloads and stuff like that over the top of it.
So, but from that perspective, maybe the right thing to do is to go ahead and call it the host network so that it provisions it, assuming that somebody using the wizard will accept the defaults unless they know to change it. And then when this runs through, we're going to take the second NIC, the second 1 gig NIC. We're going to attach these IP addresses, we'll set up the interface and attach these. The other challenge with this is it's going to require a second NIC because the 1G1 network is NIC 2. And I could do this as a pull down. Oh, hey Victor, at this point, no, never mind. I was going to say we would actually know what NICs are available on the machines, but it doesn't help us for the conduits.
Yeah, there's a bunch of logic that I want to add to basically everything conduit related, because once past setting up the admin network on a box from Sledgehammer, we know what NICs it has, and we know how they will map to conduit. So we should be able to so the backend should. It'd be nice for it to have awareness of what is and isn't valid for any given system. But that's a lot of plumbing to add in the back end.
Well, and there's some generalities that would be interesting. It would be. I love the idea of well, this is back to the family screen, really. In Crowbar 1, we built but never exposed this concept of looking at nodes in a group and grouping things. What you're describing is saying, all right, in this deployment, all of the these are the conduits that are available. These are the these are things that are common across all the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be awesome. There's so much cool stuff to do. Just not enough hours.
Yeah.
So overall, this looks like a good direction. I can change the range name to host so it provisions that first network automatically. I'll take out the admin nodes. I'll fix the operating system piece. But this looks okay.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do is
play around with it, but.
Yeah. Well, what I'm hoping to do is there's probably another pull request or two incoming for this, but what I would ask is to accept it, actually, or even accept it sooner rather than later, so that we can incrementally make sure it's not breaking other stuff. I've been trying to keep it very self-contained, and I've been building BDD tests that validate the behavior of the UI and the logic. So it should come in with pretty strong capabilities. I'd love to see it in by the next planning session. But well, I won't. Sorry?
That's going to be done making sure that it doesn't, or that it's a fairly self-contained thing.
Yeah, well, please look at I've been trying to be very careful. The challenge is that every once in a while I hit refactoring stuff that has a little bit of leakage. But I'm trying to work in independent branches from that perspective. So we've said, okay, so we're going to keep range in.
Yeah. With that Supermicro MiniITX thing up there, if it's an add, it should run CentOS just fine.
Yay!
Because it says it's an Atom processor, not some weird ARM variant.
And then the other question is, does it pixie boot? Which I'm pretty sure.
It's an Intel platform, so I'd expect that it could pixie boot this time. But yeah, we need to check.
You might also want to look at the Intel equivalents of those boards. They tend to have Intel NICs on them.
They do have Intel NICs on them. I've looked at all of those. All the Supermicron Atom boards do.
This does, yeah. It's actually, here's the spec.
Yeah, and they're all pixie bootable. I mean, the trick is finding a vendor that will sell those to us in an enclosure.
Well, MiniITX is a standard form factor, so it's super easy to get MiniITX.
Well, I know that, but does that motherboard come with BMC?
With BMC? I thought, Matt had said that there was one.
Yeah, so it does. Management, IPMI, yada, yada, yada. Okay. KVM support. Okay, yeah, it's there.
Okay, and then, so yeah, and MiniITX cases are super easy to find.
Yeah.
I think you can even find a multi. I hadn't even thought about the hard drives.
I'm laughing.
But I think
I have.
I think like tons of old hard drives.
Yeah.
Actually, good use for them.
Well, I've done some research in that area. There are some very compact power supplies that you can run those MiniITX boards from 12 volts. Single rail 12 volts and power up the entire board. So it might be an option to run a single large 12 volt supply and then just stack a bunch of these with a minimal chassis. Do a Google style.
Can we do the research offline?
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. I get so excited. All right. But please post to the list or something if you can find a solution that does that. That'd be really nice. All right. Scott, since I heard your voice, you want to talk about Travis workflow?
Yeah, sure. So did a little bit of work on Travis. Actually, Rob did most of it. I just kind of looked over his shoulder. But effectively, what we have is we have Travis actually hooked up to the repositories. So what is possible is for us to use that as a CI gating mechanism on your own private branch prior to the actual push request or pull request into the main line. So you should be able to, once we get the rest of that stuff plumbed together, actually run all the BDD tests and all that stuff against your pull on your private repo prior to actually doing a pull for the main line. So that's the way it looks. I think the work that we have to do is, effectively document that appropriately and make sure people have the right files. You need a Travis configuration file inside of your pieces, and make sure that works appropriately for us in the Travis VM environment.
And so I was having a conversation with Victor about there were two choices on this, which was to either make a single command that ran the dev tool, the dev environment, and the BDD in one thing, sort of inside the container, or run the dev container and then run BDD external to it. I've been leaning towards the second because I didn't want to add Erlang to our Docker container to run Crowbar. So that's sort of where things lined up. It's possible that we could actually run the dev mode. Actually, this might be simpler. Victor, I'd be interested in an opinion on this. We could actually have Travis just run the Rails app as a Rails app attached to Postgres without the container. Because the dev mode doesn't need to do all the setup. It really just runs as a Rails app. It still needs the workers and stuff like that, but I think we could do that.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good point to bring up on the call. Doing it in dev mode actually contains the deployment and testing infrastructure into into that Docker container, but effectively simulates the bring up of additional systems. Which is a good first cut. At some point, we'll want to add an integration.
Disagreeing with you. It sort of simulates it.
Yeah. In any case, we need to contain the test components into the Travis system for the CI gating pieces, and at some point we're going to need some sort of integration test function that'll actually exercise true systems.
Right.
So, what are you disagreeing with me on, Victor?
I don't even remember right now.
Okay. There's so many things.
The thing that Victor reminds me of every time I mention BDD is that it doesn't actually pixie boot, and so there's a lot of operational stuff that it doesn't come near to touching. It just
right. It doesn't. It is not an end-to-end test by any means.
We rely on a lot of things outside the Rails app. It only tests the Rails component, the Rails code component. We rely on a lot of other stuff. I'll settle for what it tests. Okay, sorry. I'm going to keep going down trying to get the Docker container to work on Travis as the approach to take. And then see where that goes from. I have not worked on the create a new workload. That's actually a discussion topic if we have time. I'd like to move this to the end. Okay. Because there's been some work on we created Actually, let's do this. Victor, do you mind talking about what you've been finding with the IPMI workload? Because that's effectively the key for the earlier thing. I think we can do that.
Oh, first, IPMI is not a workload.
All right. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, the hardware. Yeah, that's. So I've gone ahead and basically rewritten the hardware workload to look a lot like the OpenStack workload, where for now it'll start off as just a collection of bundled up essentially Crowbar 2.0 bar clamps in the same workload. And for the IPMI workload, I've got it so that it is up and running and functional on the PowerEdge T320 that I got a week ago. Okay. So what working means is that we can detect that the IPMI controller is there, and we can configure it to use our username and password, and we can configure it to use the IP address that we want it to run on top of. Along the way, I went and stripped out a bunch of code that was really there to work around some issues that IPMI tool doesn't have anymore. So there's been a fair amount of refactoring done there. For the IPMI roles themselves, that's pretty much as far as I plan on taking them. The IPMI workload will concern itself pretty much entirely with discovery and configuration of the IPMI controller on the system. And everything else that Crowbar needs to do with the IPMI controller should be handled through a to-be-written IPMI jig that will add capability to the nodes to do out-of-band power on, power off, chat identification, and provide hooks to do further detection to see if the IPMI controller running on is an iDRAC, in which case we can do other stuff by SSHing to it using RackAtom, detecting to see if it has WSMAN capabilities, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So were there any design issues or things that we're going to have impacts downstream? You and I talked about a power state, which is really an enhancement. Architectural changes or anything that you bumped into that's worth documenting?
From the architectural side, I went ahead and did something a little unusual in that if the IPMI workload is there, then all nodes will get an IPMI discover role. And if that discovers that there's an IPMI controller that we can configure for out-of-band management, it will go ahead and allocate an IP address for the IPMI controller, and find the corresponding network role and the IPMI configure role to that node, and then make sure that in the node role graph, the IPMI configure role is a parent of the Crowbar managed node role for that node. And if it doesn't detect an IPMI controller that it can manage, it won't do any of that stuff. So the upshot is you'll only get the IPMI configure role on nodes that actually have IPMI controllers that we can configure to use.
So you can use that to detect if IPMI is available?
The IPMI discover role, its output is that flag that the IPMI controller is enableable. And the IPMI configure role, one of the flags that it outputs is that the IPMI controller is being managed by Crowbar.
So the node will have a flag, an attribute?
The node won't have a flag. The node will not have a flag for that. That's just on the node role.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I want to move the current SSH-based power management stuff that we have into the node role out of it and into its own thing.
Right.
That way, node objects node objects themselves don't have to concern themselves about power management, other than providing some hooks that whatever more specific thing needs to plug into.
Right. Would you leave it in for things that don't have IPMI capabilities, like VMs and things like that? Actually,
part of the process there would be to abstract that out to for things like VMs, if we're not controlling the hypervisor, to abstract that out into like an in-band power management thingy. You and I had talked a little bit about there being a separation of concerns between a possible separation of concerns between jigs and out-of-band management for a node.
Right.
Or jigs and just node management stuff in general. Because the jig's job right now is, and it probably should be going forward, is just to do things to nodes based on what roles tell us to, and there's space there for another concept of we want to be able to do out-of-band things to nodes themselves that aren't necessarily controlled by any specific role, like turn the node on and off, that sort of thing.
Right. Event-driven, and events not exactly the right word, but they're not roles driven. And you gave a really interesting example, I thought, that.
Yeah, like for instance, right now, once we discover a node and it hits our managed node, we just leave the node running. But if we've along the way we've discovered that it has an IPMI controller and that we configured it, one thing we can do is after we discover that we can manage a node, we just turn it off, and then we wait until someone finds a new set of roles and commits them to turn the node back on for us to start doing things.
Right. We'd power cycle a node anyway after the discovery step and start the next thing. So, and if somebody had, so the trick is in discovery, we don't set the drives or the BIOS. We just wait. But if we're doing out-of-band, if we have out-of-band capabilities, we can do those without the OS being on anyway. Matter of fact,
it's not even a matter of that. It's a matter of if we don't have anything for the node to do, if it's not running the workload, we should just turn it off. That's all I was thinking of from that standpoint.
Right. But you wouldn't have to power it back on to set the RAID or BIOS. You can do those.
Not necessarily, but architecturally, it'll probably be easier right now if we do.
Okay.
I don't want to flutter up the architecture too much if we don't have to.
The reason why I'm asking, because if you have to boot back up to set those things, then you're going to add time back in after you've turned it off. I guess you would only turn it off if there was other work.
The time will be wasted there anyways. I mean, we're not going to do all of our RAID and BIOS configuration out of band in the long term. I mean, there are boxes that they're IPMI controllers. They don't expose WSMan. They don't have the capability of doing BIOS configuration and RAID configuration out of band. They have to do it using specialized executables that run in a CentOS or RHEL environment, and so we still have to be able to do that sort of thing in band.
I'll stop performance optimizing for a 100-node install and not worry about the 5 minutes boot time across the of the one of 40 boot systems you're going to have to go through anyway. That's funny. All right. Cool.
Yeah. And the other thing I've done with the IPMI is right now the use DHCP is still present. It may even work, but I haven't tested that at all. What I've done instead is I've made the role smart enough so that it detects that if the IPMI controller already has an address in the right range that is being used, then we'll just allocate that address for it instead of picking a new one. So for testing
Okay.
purposes, once it does the first address allocation, as long as you don't change the range out from underneath of it, it should always stick with the same address and the same login information.
Okay, so you actually tweaked the DHCP configuration.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not doing DHCP for IPMI at all right now.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought.
This is just the address allocation range. That way, unless you change your range, you're not that likely to have to move the IPMI controller out from underneath of you, which would be really annoying if you were watching what's happening on the virtual console at the time.
Okay, this was something that drove people nuts in Crowbar 1. So what you're saying is, it's actually worth restating this very clearly. If you've been doing several Crowbar runs and you've already assigned IPs to the BMC network, the system will allow you to keep the BMC network information you have if it's in the expected range.
Yeah, if it's in the expected range and it's not already allocated by something else.
Yeah, it's really helpful for testing systems. The other thing that's really helpful is if you have nodes that somebody's preset the BMCs on, as long as you're in the same range, you're good for that. So you can recycle systems, you can brownfield systems.
Yeah, that's a further optimization that I haven't added yet, because right now that it's just covered by making sure the BMC network has the range that covers your already existing IPMI space.
So Crowbar would find them, understand that it has that BMC network, so it could use it, but not have to actually set it. That's actually really nice. Very friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess are there particular issues that we're tracking the IPMI work as far as the features that are being added, or is this, how are we tracking this stuff outside of the conversation that we're having now?
That's a great question.
Right now, this is the initial commit of functionality for OpenCrowbar. I haven't been tracking issues at all.
Okay.
I've just been, this has been what I've had to do to make it so that I don't tear my hair out by getting new IP addresses for the IPMI controller every time I run through a Crowbar admin run.
But Scott, if you're thinking that these should end up in the docs, these features, because this is actually a feature description. Oops, this is a feature description. That we should definitely make sure it ends up in the docs from that perspective.
Yeah. I mean, there's 2 or 3 pieces to it, right? I understand, Victor, that you're adding this stuff so you don't pull your hair out. It's actually really good stuff. I love it. The question is there any other input that we want to have into the stuff before it's actually committed in code? And how are we going to track this stuff and make sure that we put it in the appropriate documentation places?
I mean, for some of the stuff going forward, I'd really like to get feedback from, actual prospective customers, as opposed to just being my observations on managing your out-of-band management stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, and I mean, kicking it to the list or whatever, it'd be nice if we had a clean way to handle this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'll end up doing later on today is posting, hey, we've got IPMI stuff, here's what it does so far, here's how I think we should handle things in the future, and get feedback based off of that.
Yeah. Cool. I would encourage us to be more chatty on the OpenCrowbar list with some of these things, the design specs for the Supermicro ITX board as an experiment system, and if we find cases, it'd be worth just at least saying, hey, I'm considering this or I'm doing that. We actually had a good back and forth on although we didn't circulate it to the list, on the the milestone flag for no op roles. But yeah, let's get these things on the list, guys. It's really helpful to the community. All right, 5 minutes to go. Victor, do you think we can have this conversation about the host v6 range stuff in a meaningful way?
5 minutes? Yeah. I mean, a lot of it boils down to, do we want to show off how awesome we are at doing IPv6 or not?
Yes, I do.
So, can we frame what the discussion is about, and maybe we can pick it up online?
Yeah. So pretty much right now, with IPv6, the address space is so huge that we don't have nearly as much call for needing to pair out specific ranges for our network. So right now, just if you create a new network, then everything that is on that network automatically gets an IPv6 address in it, and we assume that it's just one big flat address space.
Okay.
And so at some point we'll need to have a discussion on, whether or not that's something that customers are interested in.
And from an architectural point of view, as far as the way the system behaves, right, it simplifies a lot of the initial stand-up type of stuff. Is that what we're saying?
It has the potential to. Right now, the main thing that's blocking it is actually the version of Squid that ships with. Insisting on trying to do reverse DNS lookups for IPv6 addresses because they have more things than numbers and dots in them.
Yeah.
Squid doesn't like that.
Yeah. Other than that, I validated that Chef will work fine in IPv6 only environments. All of the core, all of the Crowbar web server works fine in IPv6 only environments. So the only thing that the only things we absolutely have to have IPv6 or IPv4 right now for is doing initial Pixie boot and talking through Squid. Everything else we can run all of our admin stuff. An IPMI requires IP version 4 right now because IPMI was written before IPv6. The IPMI specs don't know anything about IPv6 for some godforsaken reason.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are the only things that require IPv4 right now from a kind of a core cluster administration standpoint. Everything else we can do over IPv6 only.
Interesting that Sidetrack does that. So the idea is the
IPMI, we can configure it to talk over IPv6, but we can't do it via IPMI tool or free IPMI.
Oh, okay.
We'd have to do it through RackAtom or some other management tool. But the initial configuration would have to be done over IPv4, pretty much no matter what we do. And that's RackAtom is RACKADM, not Atom. Sorry.
Oh, ADM?
Yeah, it's short for iDRAC Administrator thingy.
Oh, okay. I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the correction.
Yeah.
But that limits choice.
A little bit. I mean, most people I don't expect are running their out-of-band management networks over anything other than a private IPv4 address range anyway.
Right.
Except unless they're totally insane and are fine with exposing their out-of-band management to the internet. Which some people are. Some people are crazy like that. But it's not a design pattern I want to encourage.
Yeah, we'll have to find out. If somebody comes to us with that as a requirement, then good for them. Okay. And this, I'm behind on this. I was going to work on it using the hardware stuff, and then I didn't get where I thought I would, so I might move to the Chef.
To the Chef thing?
The OpenStack. Sorry?
Never mind.
So the goal, very briefly on what that's supposed to be about, is I want to show how to use Docker containers as a development environment to do cycle testing on a workload. The template we have to create a new workload is actually woefully out of date, and we'll have to fix that. I know Mike and I have talked about Hadoop workloads, and so I need to look at what the hardware workload is like and then backport those changes into the template. It's one-time work that just needs to get done.
Well, for the hardware workload specifically, I'm just doing the thing that I did, which is porting the Crowbar 2 bar clamps over, because it's designed. I designed the bar clamp import stuff to be able to do that with minimal changes in trees.
I know. There's a couple of places where I'm grinding my teeth because the word bar clamp is like 6 levels deep and it's sort of unnecessary. But
yeah,
I'll get over it.
Well,
I feel like we're carrying technical debt.
It is, but it's also a bridge to getting things up and running faster.
Yes, and it's really pretty harmless to have some deeper paths than I'd like. It's not real technical debt.
It's design debt.
Well.
But anyways.
And with that, we are out of time. Once again, everybody, appreciate your participation. I feel like these are really productive calls. We've come out with a lot of good notes.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Next Wednesday is the 2nd of July.